Volume's good? Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks for coming out tonight at 7 o'clock. We are streaming this live on YouTube, so you'll be able to, if you're watching at home, welcome. If you want to catch this later, it'll be available on the city's YouTube channel. So make sure you smash that like button and subscribe. So we've got about 20 minutes. I'm just going to run through a quick presentation, some background information. If you attended the April town hall meeting, some of this will look familiar to you, and then there's some new information about the Millage specific, because that wasn't on the table or wasn't decided that that was the route we were going to go in April, so that's new information. After that, we'll do question and answer, whatever you want to know about, and we'll just hang out until all the questions are answered and call it a night. So with us we have Mike Smith from Anderson Eckstein Westrick. He's the city engineer. He's here to answer any technical questions you have about the project, about the actual process of the infrastructure and what that entails. I'm Jim Bruckman, city manager. Probably have seen me before. If not, hello. So we're going to go through, we'll look at the details of the project. We'll talk about project costs and funding, and then we'll open it up for any kind of discussion. So there's online resources, cityofpleasantridge.org/water. There's all of the documents that you see up there. One of the things that's particularly important is a water system reliability study. One of the questions we get sometimes is, when did we know that our water mains were an issue, and why, haven't we been looking at that? Well, this was really the thing that crystallized the fact that our water mains were becoming a problem and needed to be addressed was this 2016 study. There's a lot of flow testing and modeling that was done as part of that identified that we have poor fire flow rates. And that the problem was only going to get worse over time. So we'll talk more about that. But that was really when we started thinking about this. The next big milestone was 2018, when the state of Michigan adopted new lead and copper rules in response to the Flint crisis. When they adopted those rules, they required that all water suppliers, in this case the city, has to replace all lead service lines at public cost. Whether that lead service line is publicly or privately owned, we have to replace it at public cost. So 2018 was another milestone where the state was saying you have to do this, and you have to start doing this in 2021. So that, again, is setting our time schedule for when we have to start this project. We also know that we have 100-year-old water mains. They were built between 1920 and 1924, generally. So most of them are 100 years old. They're iron and at the end of their life cycle. So just to make sure we all have a good common understanding of what the water system entails, you've got the water main that typically runs under the street, and then there's a service line which taps into that water main and runs to the curb stop, which is right around the sidewalk. And then the private service line goes from the curb stop into the house to the meter and then your internal plumbing. This is the boundary between what the public owns and what the private owns. What the state has mandated, and where lead, when you hear lead in the system, it's lead service lines which come from the water main into the house. The water mains are cast iron. They're not lead. So when we have to replace the lead service lines, it's this portion right here that we have to replace. Just some background on the cost. We started doing some of these lead replacements in November of last year. We're going to be doing another round this year to meet the state's schedule. But the cost to replace a private service line from the stop box at the curb into the house is about $2,600. The public side service line replacement is anywhere from $7,000 to $10,000, because that's where you have to cut into the street, dig up the street, concrete repair. It depends on if you're going to the long side or the short side. The water main is on one side of the street or the other. So the long side run is the one that goes all the way under the street. The short side is closer, the side of the street that's closer to the water main. Where are we at with lead service lines? We have 699 known or suspected lead service lines. This was based on our preliminary materials analysis, which was done through a records research. We haven't gone out and verified this in the field. Things change over the course of 100 years, and we don't have perfect records for everything, but our preliminary information is that we are sitting on 60% of all service lines are lead. And when you look at us versus our neighbors, this is our known number, and then this is our suspected number based on when the house was built for those properties we didn't have records for. And you can see how we compare to all of our neighbors. Ferndale reported things oddly. I doubt that they'll end up with this high of a number. The issue really is that Pleasant Ridge Most communities stopped using lead service lines in this area in the mid-30s. And Pleasant Ridge was almost completely developed by the mid-30s. Whereas most of these other communities had parts that were developed before World War II, but had a lot of the town develop after World War II. So that's why the percentage basis in all those other communities is much lower than what we have. So that also means that there's a much larger customer base to spread the costs out over for the lead service line replacement in these other neighboring communities. What does it look like? This is one of the service line replacements we did last fall. You can see where they dug into the street to access the main, to tap in for the new taps. You can see where they dug up to replace the stop box. The lead service line replacement typically requires 3 points of access, one at the main, where you have to dig up the street, one at the stop box, where the public side lead comes into a stop, and then the private lead goes into the house. And then they go into the basement, and they pull the new lead service line through the ground. So they have a machine that pulls it from the main to the stop box, and then it pulls it through the ground, just pulls the old pipe out, and the new pipe pulls along behind it. So it's actually not very disruptive to front yards. So are we going to be digging up your front yard? Does the service line go under your front porch? Sure, it might. We won't have to dig anything up to get to that because we'll be pulling through the ground for most of these. But this also highlights the fact that we're going to be cutting into our streets. If 60% of our houses have lead service lines, we're going to be doing a lot of this cutting into the street where the water main already is located. So talking about the water mains, we know that they're 100 years old. They're 6 inches in diameter. The current standard for a residential water main is 8 inches in diameter. So we're already undersized to start with. But then you have the fact that cast iron mains corrode and they become brittle over time. When a fire hydrant is used and you get brown water, that's all of that corrosion that's on the inside of that water pipe shaking loose from the increased pressure that's drawn out by the fire hydrant. And as that diameter decreases, you get less pressure and reliability over time. If anyone's ever had galvanized piping in your house and one day you just kind of have drips of water coming out of your shower, it's the same process that happens with our water mains. So these are examples of what a cast iron water main looks like. This is the original pipe, and this is all the corrosion that builds up over time, narrowing that pipe. These are actual water mains that AEW had replaced during projects they did in Fraser and Clawson. And you can see where that corrosion and those deposits, and in fact even brittle and breaks happen as those cast iron water mains age. So we have a risk of failure because we have old mains. So every time we're tapping into those to do a new lead service line, that's a point of risk. We have fire flow rate drops. Our fire flow is currently inadequate. Our peak hour flow is low but adequate, and our normal demand flow is currently acceptable. But none of these are getting better. They're only getting worse over time. So the question we get sometimes is, well, do we have to replace our water mains now? If we don't, then the next checkpoint really when we would be looking at replacing them would be when we redo our streets. But concrete streets can last 50 years with maintenance or more, particularly if you're on top of your maintenance schedule for those. So that means some of the water mains could be 150 years old the next time we start doing a major infrastructure project to dig up the streets. And as those water mains continue to corrode and narrow and narrow and narrow, we're going to see more and more pressure drops over time. And now we're already digging into the street for every lead service line replacement. So we're already digging up a good portion of the street. So I think given these considerations, it only makes sense to dig these up now and replace the water mains now. The real risk we run if we don't replace these water mains is that as they start to corrode and the diameter drops, it's no longer fire flow that's inadequate. If we have normal day flow that becomes inadequate, it's not something we can go out and fix by replacing one section of pipe because all of our pipes are corroding at the same time. So once we get to that point where we have normal day flow problems, the only answer is truly to replace all the water mains at once. And that is a very expensive and very difficult project to do. And so if we have inadequate water pressure citywide for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, that's not going to be an acceptable situation. So this is our current peak hour pressure based on the modeling. The red areas are less than 50 PSI. you can see this is where the Saukwa transmission main feeds into the city system. So all of the water in the city flows from this point. It's at Oxford and Woodward. And as that flows out through the city, you can see the pressure drops, particularly when you get to the west side of the city where it's going uphill, and particularly where there are limitations in the distribution system. One of the limitations we have is that there's no water main on Woodward between Oakland Park and Elm Park. So all of the water that flows to the west side of the city generally has to go down to this point. You can also get around by it going to the east side and then up and then over, but water takes the path of least resistance. So there's a pressure choke point right there. This is our current fire flow. 750 psi, Mike, is 750 is the minimum? Yes. The minimum. You can see that all of these areas, this thing's not working very well. All these areas with this color are already below that. All of these areas are already below, and then these red areas are below 500 psi. When there's a fire flow test, residents on Elm Park lose water pressure. We've had fire flow tests done at Iron Ridge up here, and we got, as soon as they did that, we got phone calls at City Hall from residents who live on Elm Park who were taking a shower and the water just stopped at their house. So that's a good indicator of kind of the problem we're dealing with. And the reason for that is here, it's probably elevation and lack of looping in the system to get water to that location. So this is our current fire flow. This is our current water system. All the red lines are the 6-inch water mains. The only water mains that have been replaced are Millington, Elm Park Boulevard, and Maplefield. And those were all done about 20 years ago. So with the water system improvements, it's replacing all of the old 100-year-old cast iron mains. 23 of 26 water mains will be replaced, but also improving the system by connecting this gap in the system to provide a looped access to the west side so water can flow up Woodward and then down any of the streets rather than all going through the Cambridge Ridge intersection. And then adding a secondary main along Indiana so that we have a series of loops on the east side to improve water pressure. Our current fire flow, and then this is our modeled fire flow after the project is done. And you can see that we're well above the minimum standards everywhere, except here on Woodward Heights because this is a dead end. There's really nothing you can do about that because it runs into the city of Ferndale. And then you can see the Elm Park area. That's always going to have a little bit lower pressure because of elevation, but at least it's above that 750 psi.
Go back to that picture one more time. Okay.
Jim, go back one more. One more. Yeah, this one. Question, is Oxford a different, it looks like it's different.
Oxford is a 10-inch main.
Okay.
And again, that's because that's what's supplying most of the west side.
So that one wouldn't need to be replaced?
Well, it would. It's probably cast iron, but it doesn't need to be replaced.
It's old.
It's old. So it'll be replaced with a new 10-inch main.
Okay.
Just a quick question. Has the origination of water in the city always only been at that one site, or do we have other sites that were removed when we did the Woodward 696 project?
That's always been our source since Saukwa developed their transmission system. Okay. So it's a 30-year plan. Replace 20 to 23 existing water mains by 2051, 2 new mains. And then lead service lines, the state says we're supposed to replace all of our lead service lines within 20 years. We've applied for by doing an asset management plan to do this over 30 years. We have such a huge number and high percentage of lead service lines to replace that the cost gets very high if we try to do that quickly. So we've asked the state hasn't authorized any extensions to that schedule yet, but we are, under our current plan, we estimate 77% of those will be replaced by 2041, 90% by year 25, and then 100% by year 30. When we talk about these projects, how do we prioritize what streets and what water mains and what lead service lines we're going to replace first? Well, first is number of lead service lines on a particular street. The state says we have to replace 5% of our lead service lines every year. So we have a number we have to try to hit. What then is a system pressure benefit? and then what's the age and condition of the street.
So Norwich, which got paved last, gets water mains last.
We don't know yet, but it'll probably be farther down the list.
Yeah.
What was the question?
It was whether Norwich gets done last. So let's hold all our questions to the end, because one of the things, I just want to make sure that we get through this in a timely fashion, and I need to be repeating these questions so that those watching on YouTube can hear what the question is. So lead service lines by street. This is number of lead service lines on your vertical axis, and then the horizontal axis doesn't mean anything. You can see that Kensington, Wellesley, Oakdale have a lot of lead service lines, and then you just kind of move down the slope. These will be the streets we prioritize first, because we have a high number of lead service lines there, and we need to get out ahead of the state schedule for replacing those. For fiscal year 22, which is right now, that goes until July 1, 2022. We're going to replace all the remaining lead service lines on Elm Park Boulevard, Maplefield, and Millington. Those are where the water mains have already been replaced. This is the first year that we have this new source of revenue through water rates to do this infrastructure project. So these are going to be more straightforward and cheaper to get these done because we don't have to touch the water main. Next year, so sometime between July 1, 2022 and July 1, 2023, Kensington would be done. No project in 24. You can see that 1.6 million is about the estimated cost to do one of these projects. So our income stream to do the project over 30 years breaks down to about $850,000 a year. So we need about 2 years of revenue to do one project, especially for these projects that have a high number of lead service lines and for the streets that are longer. Kensington, Oakdale, Wellesley, they're some of our longer streets, so more linear feet, higher project cost. And then down by 29, the new Indiana and Woodward water mains, because that provides system-wide pressure benefits for everybody to make sure that we can distribute water efficiently out. After 29, it'll be determined based on those prioritization factors. We obviously can't commit to what water main we're going to change in 2030. Things change, we don't know. But we'll be looking at the number of lead service lines, the condition of the street, and then those are the main two. So when we talk about this, the first thing let's talk about is federal infrastructure bill. There may be money for lead service lines. There may not be. If we get it, fantastic. We will adjust our rates down. We'll adjust our millage down to account for that money that comes in from other sources. But we're not counting on it. We can't wait because obviously they can't pass a debt ceiling increase. We don't know when they're going to pass an infrastructure bill, let alone when the money actually gets here. So the state's saying we have to replace these lead service lines right now. So I acknowledge that this could happen. I hope it happens. I hope we get federal money. We've been working with Representative Levin's office to get an earmark for the Kensington water main project. If things pass, it looks good that we might get $600,000 from the federal government for that project. So again, we would have to look at whether we want to reduce rates, whether the City Commission wants to accelerate some of the projects so we get this project overall done in fewer years. That'll be a decision that the City Commission has to make when we hopefully get to confront that decision. The total project, we're looking at $25 million to do this. So over the course of 30 years, that's $850,000 a year. That breaks out to about $8.4 million for the lead service line replacement. That's about a third of the overall project. And of that, it's about $1.8 million to replace the private side and about $6.6 million for the public side service line replacement. The water main replacements, the remaining $16.5 million or 67%. So overall, the private side lead service line replacement is about 7% of the total project. The Waterfront Impact. Our baseline water fund operates on about a $1.25 million budget. And that handles the basic maintenance for the water system, the basic maintenance for sewers, delivering the water, paying for stormwater treatment, paying for stormwater runoff treatment, all of those basic things. The new infrastructure costs are $850,000. So that gives you some idea of what this is adding to our water budget. Royal Oak has a very different picture. They already have water main replacement built in their budget. They've got 10 or maybe 7% of their homes have lead service lines. So their percentage increase in what their total budget or expenditures are for water is much, 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 much lower. They can just absorb that. They can raise the rates a little bit. They're not having this discussion that we have to have. Again, in graphic form, this is the same information showing how all of those different elements of the water fund break out. You can see that stormwater treatment and sewage treatment are the biggest two items. And then the wholesale cost of water, sewer maintenance, capital projects, drain debt for the George W. Kuhn, where all of our wet weather flows go. You can see what this adds, what that does to the overall picture. We have an existing infrastructure millage. You probably know about this. It's what paid for the streets to be redone. Right now we have about $120,000 a year of available revenue from the infrastructure millage. And that's used to maintain streets, to do street maintenance, to repair the streets as they age. So that's not something we can count on to get the lead service line project done. These blue bars are the same size, so it just gives you some idea of what that gap is. Can we cut expenses to pay for this? Maybe, but our public works, recreation, street maintenance, and sewer maintenance expenditures are equal to what this lead service line replacement and water main replacement project is going to cost. We can't do without public works. We have to cut the grass. We could eliminate recreation, but I don't think we want to do that. But this is really just want to give you a sense of the size of what this project is adding. Or the police. This is close to what we spend on the police every year. We know we can't get rid of them. So the rate impact. What we have is the 2020 water rate. That was last year. That was our baseline. The current 2021 water rates, which were adjusted up this year to provide that $850,000 of revenue to do the project. And then the potential 2022 rate, which counts for the millage and then the rates being adjusted back down. And what you'll see is we started with the ready to serve charge of $42.50 each billing period. Ready to serve is a flat fee that pays for infrastructure maintenance. That has been going up over the last 3 years as we prepared for this project. That we've been slowly increasing that. That's going to remain, and that's going to pay for a good portion of the project. Millage is not paying for all of this project. So if the millage passes, then water rates and ready to serve go back to last year's level. It's a hybrid approach if the millage passes. The ready to serve charge provides about $225,000 of revenue for the water infrastructure project. That's a flat fee that all households pay equally. The millage would provide the other 75% of the revenue, and that's obviously based on the cost, the taxable value of your property. So what is proposed is a hybrid funding model using a flat fee plus a millage approach. What does this do? Is Pleasant Ridge going to be outrageously priced? Is the cost of living here going to be something that is not acceptable or attractive anymore? Well, the total annual utility bill plus your average local tax bill that you pay in Huntington Woods is $5,043 right now. In Birmingham, it's $4,300. We'll be at $4,300 going forward. So we are still competitive in the total cost to live in the community. Will the higher property tax rate crush home values in Pleasant Ridge? Well, Huntington Woods and Ferndale both have higher local millage rates than Pleasant Ridge does. So somebody cross-shopping a house in Northwest Ferndale or Pleasant Ridge, the local tax rate in Pleasant Ridge is still going to be lower with a pool. And Huntington Woods is still going to be higher than we would be. So we've always been a little bit lower. Unfortunately, now we'll be right there kind of equal with our neighboring peer communities, but we won't be outrageous. Funding option comparison. Another thing we've heard is some residents would prefer a flat fee that all houses pay equally rather than the taxable value approach that a millage uses. So these are the three scenarios for the funding option. You can see the current water rates we have in the left column. The middle column is what it would be under the millage next year. And then the final column would be if we reduced the usage rate back to last year's levels and set the ready to serve charge at a level sufficient to generate all the revenue we need to do the project. You can see ready to serve would go from $82.50 to $127.75 per billing period. So when we model that out, there's two ways of looking at this, right? We say it's more equal or something. There's the dollar cost that each household pays. And you could say that it's more equal if every house pays $525 a year on the ready to serve charge. or it's more equal if all houses see a similar percentage increase in their bottom line expenditures. You can defend both of those positions. You could argue that you prefer one of those or the other. Looking at the three scenarios, the millage creates a 5.5 to 7.2% increase for almost all households in the city. The percentage increase is very tight along that band. When you look at the water rate, this is paying for this project all through water rates. What you find is there's about 30% of houses that still sit in that 5.5 to 7% increase total cost. But lower taxable value, if you're under 200,000, you're kind of maybe paying a little bit more. Your percentage increase in your bottom line outlay is higher. And the higher taxable value houses see about a 2 to 5% increase in their total outlay. And then the flat fee option, again, intuitively, this makes sense if you think about it, houses that have a lower taxable value would end up paying a lot more under the flat fee approach. Houses with a higher taxable value pay relatively less with the flat fee approach. So I understand that every household is going to prefer one or the other of these options based on your specific circumstances. There's trade-offs to each of these. One of the considerations that we have with the flat fee approach is lower value houses, maybe houses that are on a fixed income, houses that have less resources available to them may see a harder to bear increase in their water bill. This could be 14% increase in their total bottom line. So that's something we're cognizant of. And I fully understand and acknowledge the arguments you can make either way. Just wanted to make sure that we had some data out there to show what the real impact of these three funding options are. Is the flat fee ready to serve charge on the table? No, not right now. It could be if the millage fails and we have this discussion next spring about setting water rates for next year. But that's just because we've heard some commentary and some comments about how some households would prefer that. Wanted to put that data out there. So the benefits, 60% of customers are getting their lead service lines replaced at public cost. Increased system pressure and reliability for all customers. If we don't start this project now and we wait till 30 years from now, it's only getting worse. And we can't avoid maintenance and replacement. It's not a situation where waiting to replace a water main means that it breaks and then we dig up and replace one section of water main and everything's fine again. Because these are corroding along the full length of the mains, that's really where the big problem lies. So I think that's it. Let me touch on one more thing. One of the things that we have to be cognizant and take heed for is that the state rules say that when we set rates, we have to replace these lead service lines at public cost. Another question we get is, could we have different rates? If I already have replaced my service line, if I already have copper, if I don't have lead, why should I have to pay for that? And I understand that. We looked into that with the city attorney. There's some state court cases. Bolt versus Lansing is probably the most notable one from the late 90s, which set some ground rules for what a city can and can't charge and how we can charge utility rates. One of the things we can't do is levy a tax that's disguised as a fee on a utility bill. So this is a limitation we have, the state rule that says that it has to be at public cost. And that, along with the Bolt decision, means we can't have different rates for different classes of user. So if we think about classes of user, okay, I personally live on Maplefield. My water main's been replaced already, and I have a copper service line. So what's my benefit to this? Should I pay a lower rate than somebody that's living on a street that's getting a new water main and a new service line? And the answer is no. By the state rules and by the administrative rules, we have to have one rate that everybody pays. So keep that in mind as well. We've looked into that with the city attorney. We have his opinion, and we are limited. We have to have kind of everybody is in the same boat on rates. That is my presentation, and we're going to open it up to questions. Just raise your hand, and I'll take note, and we'll get around the room. Okay, so we're going to go here, 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 and then here. Yes, I will repeat the questions. Yes, I will repeat the questions so that everyone can hear it. The question was, does the projected 30-year cost account for future construction cost increases, inflation, all of those, kind of increases in costs over time? And the answer is we built in an inflationary 3% annual increase in costs. Will that hold? I don't know. That's one of the challenges with doing this over 30 years. We'll address that. If water rates have to go up at 0.5% higher than inflation in a year to account for that difference as we start to do the projects, we'll look at that and we'll make it work. But you're right, that's a risk that we're aware of and we're just going to have to manage around.
Yeah, because 3% is pretty, that's not really conservative at all for construction cost increase and everything, so
These days, you're right.
there could be significant cost overruns for what the rest of it.
Right, and again, 3% is not what we've seen recently for construction costs. It's like healthcare. I don't know how long that these costs can keep going up higher at the rate of inflation before something has to happen, but that's something we're definitely aware of. I think Marie, you're next.
So, my question is, if this appears to be a play as you pay process, we're accruing funds over 2 years and expending them, and therefore we're doing this over 30 years instead of the state mandated 20 because you put together a plan with either. So the question is, why aren't we doing this with a bond so that we could generate the funds, even if it was done over a series of bonds, generate more funds and get more work done faster and simply pay for it back over time?
Sure. So the question was, why don't we bond for this? To get the work done quicker, to pay back the bonds over time. And the answer to that is, one, we have a debt cap limit. Every municipality can only levy so much debt, and that's based on your revenues and taxable value. We don't have enough debt. This project is so big relatively for us that we don't have enough debt cap limit room to bond for the whole project. We could only do a portion of the project to bond for it. We could. We looked at that. Even with very low 2.5%, 3% interest rates, it adds it was $8 or $9 million to the total project, to the total project cost. It would be the 3% is our inflation, construction inflation, but then you also add on the interest that you pay on bonds. And we would have to increase the amount of the ask. The millage request, the funding we would have to have would be higher.
I'd like to see those calculations.
Okay. I believe you're over here, yes?
Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
With regard to the flat rate ability to fund this, I guess my first question is, why isn't that on the ballot? Why is what's on the ballot an up or down vote on the millage? Who made the decision to make that the up or down vote and not a flat service or a flat tax or a flat rate?
The question is, why isn't the flat fee ready to serve option on the ballot? Why is only the millage on the ballot? The answer to that is because millages have to be approved by the voters. The water rates are approved by the city commission so your opportunity to influence that would be if the millage fails in November. Then this project will continue to be paid for through the water fund in some way, through some combination of usage rates and ready to serve charge. And that rate setting process would be next year in May when the city commission approves the new rates. So if the millage fails, then it is the city commission's decision next year for how that goes. And that would be your time to communicate to the city commission on what you prefer.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, the city commission could have just approved the flat fee already.
They did.
And the city commission approved.
What I'm paying now is based on my water usage, not just a flat fee that's distributed to everyone here equally.
Partially. The ready to serve charge went from $42.50 to $82.50. That's a flat fee. So the 60% of the increased funding, the water fund, the increase in water rates this year, 60% of that increase came in the form of flat fee. The remaining 30% or 40% was through the water usage rate.
But again, the city commission could have simply said, we are taking all the number of households in Pleasant Ridge, dividing the cost, amortizing it out to over 30 years, and everyone's going to pay the same exact amount. Done. We wouldn't be here, right?
Correct?
They chose
Okay.
not to.
So now what's only up for vote is essentially this progressive tax where you want to have people who are, especially new homeowners, fund this over people who've been here for a much longer time. That seems to be what is being asked to be voted on. And you're asking people to pay a disproportionate share if they've moved into this community within the last 5 years. Whereas people who've been here for a lot longer, and no, obviously not despairing to that, but that's not a fair way, because it has no relationship to what you're doing. Why are new homeowners paying more, a disproportionate share to people who've been here longer?
Yes.
If I go to Kroger and buy a gallon of milk, I don't pay more because I moved to Pleasant Ridge 5 years ago. I pay the same as anyone else in this room. But you're asking me now to pay more because I bought 5 years ago. That's not fair.
That's how property taxes in Michigan work. That's how police, I mean, right now, police, parks, all of city functions are funded in that exact same way.
But it doesn't have to be that way.
Well, then you obviously should vote how you feel on this, and once we get the results of the ballot in November, we'll proceed accordingly.
But Jim, this is also really bad public policy, because you're now affecting the ability of people to sell their home and their marketing of their home. Whereas doing it through even just a water usage encourages people to conserve, for God's sake. That's good public policy. This is bad public policy.
So we were, we had, I think it was you, yes.
So maybe I don't understand this correctly, but one of the last graphs you had up with the flat fee made it look like, okay, oh, but these people are going to be paying way more, these people are going to be paying way less, but a flat fee would be we're all paying the exact same. So I just,
That was the
way you can chart it out can make it look a certain way, but if we're all paying a flat fee, we're all paying a flat fee, correct?
correct. So the question was, the last chart made it look like some people are paying more, some are less, but really it's the dollar value. That was the percentage increase. That was to show the relative impact on, so every house right now pays a tax bill and then they pay an annual water bill. So that's the baseline. And then under each option, you can chart out, okay, this household will pay, this different bottom line and what's the percent difference there. So the flat fee, lower taxable value houses have a higher percentage increase in their annual bottom line. That's what that chart was showing.
Yes, but that would still be an equal amount of pay across all homes.
In dollar terms, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I think I like to say it both ways so that it's not
Sure.
only perceived one way or the other.
Okay, so I was through my first round of hands. Everyone who has something they want to say, raise your hand now so I can take note. Okay, this time we will start over here.
What administrative costs are involved in this?
None, it's just it's a standard construction project. You've got construction, administration, inspections. In terms of city staff administration costs, there's none.
Yeah, do they, what about the streets when they're torn up and do we have to pay for those sidewalks again?
To pay for them again. No, that's all rolled into this cost. Concrete restoration, that's all included in the engineer's estimates. It was used as the baseline for the cost estimate for this.
Do they use 10-inch pipes?
No, this will be 8-inch.
So that's what they use, right?
Yeah, 8-inch is your standard residential. Some of them may be 10-inch if they're,
Maybe 10, some of them maybe 12.
right. So, your Oxford, your Ridge, the distribution mains, so they're feeding, all the other ones might be larger.
But individual streets would be 8-inch, right?
Correct. That's your standard today.
The issues with the fire flow.
Yes.
Are these getting to the point where Nfpa standards are not being met, or when do we fall to that point? And will there be any change in our fire insurance given improvements in water flow?
Do you know anything about that, Mike?
No, I'm not certain
Yeah.
if there would be any
So,
benefits to it.
so the question was about fire flow rates and NFPA and insurance rates. We can still provide the fire flow. The issue is the pressure drops everywhere else. And as we get some of these projects done, that's why we're prioritizing some of the system-wide benefit projects first to be able to get water out to the pipes better than we have now to maintain and improve that pressure quickly.
So you're saying we're not at risk from a fire safety point of view, we're at risk from a public usage and convenience point of view?
For now, yes. Okay, let's see. Yep, go ahead.
Is there a way for us to meet with somebody or find a place for
Right.
how this is gonna work out. And I do know that my water bill, which is usually 170, 180, was $400 this month.
And there's, so the question was, how can I find out what my water rates are, or how this change will impact me? And also that my bill was $400 this month, and it's usually 170, 180. I'll start with the water bill. This is our highest usage period. This was July and August that you're paying for, so it's always the highest bill of the year. It's always a when you get this water bill, and it's even more of an this year because the rates have gone up. How can I get the information? The easiest way is to email me. This is one because you have ready to serve, you have water usage rates, and you have your taxable values. There's a lot of variables that go into what the bottom line for each house is. Right. So just send me an email, citymanager@cityofpleasantridge.org, and I'll work on getting an idea of what that would look like for you. It's very difficult to say with exactitude with this process because of all the variables, but I can give you a good idea. Okay, here and then here.
Jim, when they come in to do the street, like when they did construction on our street, come in, tear up the whole street and go in each house, they'd be put shut down for this project?
Probably not. For this one, the water mains will probably be done using directional drilling, where they dig down at a few points and then drill it through the ground. One of the things we want to do is move the water mains out from under the street as much as we can. We have to balance the trees. We have to balance the street. So we're going to try to minimize the disruption. Your street should, the disruption should only be on one side of the street where the water main is, so there should be clear path. Should be a little bit less disruptive than the street project was. And then, of course, we have to dig down physically where every stop box is located. But that occurs on the sidewalk, not under the street. So every street's going to be a little bit different. Some streets are 60 feet wide, some are 50 feet wide, some the water main is already at the edge, some it's in the middle. So that's going to be something that we have to look at for design on each street. And we'll have a meeting, just like we did for the streets. There will be a pre-meeting for all the residents on the street to explain the project, explain what the impacts are going to be on you and your daily life, and what to expect.
So the street that's ripped up, that'll all be replaced with new?
Yes. And yes, anything that's ripped up will be replaced as part of this. That's all built into these cost estimates. Basic, except the lawn. So that's basic. It'll be topsoil and seed. But yes, the lawn will be on the homeowner to restore it to their own liking. Right here?
Yeah, this is a follow-up to some of the questions regarding different avenues for funding. One was the flat fee. And more specifically, I'm not an attorney, but in reading the Bolt versus the City of Lansing decision, the Supreme Court, and as far as I can tell, has not been modified or changed, outlined three parameters to determine when it's a fee versus when it's an illegal tax. Or I mean, a legal fee versus a tax. And I'm just kind of curious, from your knowledge from the city attorney, how would a flat fee escape the very specific parameters outlined in that decision?
Okay, so the question is, with the Bolt versus Lansing decision, what is my legal opinion on how the fees would meet the three tests?
What our city attorneys
I understand. And my follow-up is, I have a legal opinion, I'm not an attorney. How this would meet Bolt, I'm not even going to offer an answer to that because I'm only going to get myself into trouble speaking on legal matters. There's also been, there also have been court cases that upheld ready-to-serve charges. So that's the basis for having a ready-to-serve charge because those have been upheld. The question is, one of the concerns I have is there's a ready-to-serve charge and then there's a ready-to-serve charge to fund, a huge project like this. And there's always a risk of a lawsuit, of legal action over utility rates, always. One of the benefits of a millage is that it's unimpeachable. If the voters approve it, that is the process, the gold standard under the state of Michigan. It can't be challenged. So that's a consideration that's kind of in the background. Our water rates are compliant with Bolt. The city attorney could tell you why. And ready-to-serve charges have been upheld in court. But the question is, do we want to sort of test that? I don't.
the question was related to, because that was put out as an option. I'm trying to, what the city attorney says, is that even a legal option?
Right, it's legal. The ready-to-serve is legal. The question is,
I'm talking about the flat
Oh,
How does it meet points?
well, because ready to serve is a flat fee that's been upheld in other court cases after Bolt. But every lawsuit is a little bit different and a little bit unique with, some factors. So, I don't want to say that we're completely there, but there's a basis for it. Okay, so I think we had, Curtis, and then we'll come up this way.
Just about, maybe asking you a question you've already answered, but I think it would be helpful to respond again. One is approximately how much of the new water rates and sewer rates will be rolled back if the millage passes?
So the question is how much of the new water and sewer rates will be rolled back if the millage passes?
Yeah, go back over these. I was just gonna suggest to do that.
So this was our baseline. This is what we were paying in 2020 before July 1. And our water and sewer usage rate, that's for every unit of water you use, was $77.25. The ready to serve was $42.50 last year. That's every bill. And then these are this is a component that's not going to change, stormwater runoff. That's something that's a pass-through that the county charges us. This is set based on what they charge us every year. It's just a pure pass-through. Currently, ready to serve almost doubled. So this is your flat fee funding infrastructure. And then the usage rate went from $77.25 to $106.15. These rates were set based on modeling, trying to level out the impact on a percentage basis on all households. That's why those numbers were there. It kind of created the most sort of percentage-wise level, although there's a lot of variance. Some houses saw a 2% increase. Some houses saw a 15% increase in their total bottom line under this scenario. So this is what they'd go back to next year. So it would go back to the $42.50 ready to serve. Again, that's a flat fee on the water bill that would continue to fund a quarter of the project. And then water rates would go down. It's not the same one because there are inflation charges, the wholesale cost of water, the 2% inflation increase every year. But the water rate would go back down to, very, very comparable to what it was last year.
Question on this though. You're showing.
Hold on. I'm sorry, Curtis has the floor.
I believe Marie's question trying to get at this. If instead of doing it this way, you did it with the bond, you referenced an $8 or $9 million additional interest fee we brought on that basically was the determining factor. Do I understand that?
Yes.
Can you explain that again? What if instead of 30 years, you did it 10 years or fewer?
So the question is, what if we did a bond and we got the project done in 10 years, but we'd still be paying for it over 30 years. And we'd be paying more over 30 years because the interest cost would be something that we're not getting that interest cost under the pay-as-you-go option. So the project could be done and completed quicker. There will be maybe a little bit less inflationary construction cost risk. That's a real thing. But again, we would have to do a series of bonds and pay those off. But the numbers truly do start to impact how much we pay. We pay more under the bond option. Okay, so yeah, here.
So if the mill were to pass, what exactly are you promising? Because it seems like you're trying to threatening with high rates if the mill fails. But what are you actually giving us? Say, for example, it did pass with regards to the water rate, not just 1 year, $40 or whatever. Like how does that carry through the 30 years?
Well, this would be the baseline. Ultimately, the city commission makes a decision every year on what to charge for water rates, but the only thing.
I'm pretty sure they usually go up every year. So you're saying there will not be increases or is inflation or what?
So the water rates have been going up pretty much at rate of inflation, and they would continue to go up at rate of inflation every year because everything else, that the water fund pays for is subject to inflation.
So what are we really saving? Just that initial $40 for on 1 year?
Well, this is every bill.
On year?
So the question is, this isn't every year. This is every bill. So 6 times a year, you pay this as a flat fee on your water bills. This project has to be done. The lead service lines have to be replaced. We're mandated by the state, and we know that our water mains have to be replaced as well. So it's not really a question of what we're saving. The bottom line total outlay that the residents of Pleasant Ridge pay is going to be the same, whether it's on the water rates or it's on the millage or the combination of both.
But not the person, not the household.
Correct. That's going to vary.
Your total will
So every household is going to have a different, every household has their own unique calculus. And every household is going to do better under one of these scenarios or the other. And, you know, you can be mad that the scenario that is on the millage or on the ballot would be the millage would be worse for you. I understand that. Vote no. The millage is a steady source of income for the city. It's water rates. As people reduce their water usage, as water bills go up, we have to increase the rates more then to make up for that revenue shortfall. Because, you know, we have a bottom line number we have to hit every year to do the infrastructure project. So I understand that, you know, every household is going to have their own calculus on this. And, you know, it's really, there's two, maybe 2.5 scenarios. The flat fee ready to serve is just part of the water rate. That's a water rate way of paying for this. Or there's the millage way of paying for this, which, again, the millage is only paying for 3/4 of the project. The water rates are always going to pay for some of this. Come back to you, Jeff. Charlie?
Kind of on that point, Jim, the increase in the water rates, that only covers the lead service lines, right?
So the question is, the increase in the water rates only covered the lead service lines, and no, it didn't. The increase in the water rates was sufficient to provide the $850,000 a year revenue to replace the water mains and the lead service lines.
So this is, so if it's voted no, and it's pretty, the millage that is, and it's clear to the city council that, you know, we have to reevaluate how we're gonna take care of these mains, then perhaps it makes sense to revisit and reduce the water bill so it just covers what we're legally obligated to do, which is replace the lead service lines. And I bet you there's a little bit of money in our existing maintenance as well, so this could drop down significantly.
If you don't replace the 100-year-old end-of-life water mains,
We can't ignore
sure.
that. City, or the state coffers are full right now. There's likely and we don't know this, but there's likely an infrastructure bill coming. Plus, we don't know. We'll see how that plays out, whether they agree with it or not, doesn't matter, but something's gonna happen and kick loose. I think it makes sense to perhaps slow play the millage, see what happens there. I have great faith in you and the city council that you can go and lobby Lansing when these monies come available. I'd be willing to bet we're gonna get something. And I think that's a perfect project to apply it to. But I'm a little, surprised that the rates were increased to take care of this whole project when there's a lot of uncertainty in this room from what I'm gathering and how we best want to approach the lines. I don't think anyone wants to ignore it, but how we approach it. So let's take care of the lead, and then let's separate out the sewer line or the water main and take it from there. And there's money coming down the road, so.
Well, there is money out there. The state is making some money available to local communities, and we've applied and pursued all of it and won precisely none of it, because the state of Michigan's criteria always favor lower income communities, rural communities, boxes that Pleasant Ridge will never check.
So that's one of the criteria.
Pardon?
Size.
Right, and all of the size, the communities that get that are rural.
There'll be something in the next 12 to 24 months, and this is on the November ballot, right?
That's
So
why I
we have an
understand.
off election year with low turnout, 45 days that we're gathering. I mean,
seems
that's
premature.
that's a quick fuse to make these decisions. So,
Jim?
boy, why it's on this one, I'm surprised, but so be it.
Hold on, we'll come back to this side. I think we had one, I have no answer for that. That's, you know, that's an opinion. I do not have the same level of faith that you do that outside money is going to materialize.
City council in consideration.
Sure.
Saying, you know, let's just back off the reins a little bit and see what happens.
Okay, understood. Over here.
I think, Jeff, you had a question first?
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
No, I was just gonna make the point that you're coming out with messaging that this is the most equitable solution. Yet you've admitted in this meeting that it depends on how you look at it in terms of percentages or dollars. So I would encourage the city to be more transparent on the equity side of your messaging.
Right, that is, you know, that is, I think, the difference when, you know, you have to look at the impact on all households and consider that there are many different kinds of households in the city.
But you're choosing one set of messaging. Even the charts that you showed are charts for. You're doing it to get your point across as opposed to sort of showing both sides of the view. That's my point.
Sure, I could throw a chart that had a flat line that was $550 a year. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, I had a two-part question, probably on the same line, is that you showed an average of $4,000 in taxes for Pleasant Ridge. I've been here for 11 years. That's never been my average.
Where was that?
You showed it. You said the average for Pleasant Ridge was $4,000.
We all wanna sign up for that.
Okay.
Right? We'll even pay the Birmingham one that you showed.
And that included water in your slide.
This is an important point because what you pay in your tax bill, the question is a $4,000.
It wasn't done with my question.
Well, okay. Well, let me, do you want me to?
So that's reflective of what you showed, but the average would be 25 or whatever, but that's a little bit of misdirection because, like I said, most people don't pay that average, and so they would bear, or they would have an unfair burden
Let me.
on that $800,000.
So the question or statement, I guess, was that most houses don't pay $4,000 of taxes. And that's your total bottom line taxes. Remember that this is your local tax bill. This is not your total tax bill because you also pay taxes to the schools, to the county, all of those. So
A $3.5 million increase would increase that anyway, right?
a $3.5 million increase would be about a 7% increase in your total tax bill.
Right. So, I mean, having said that, I mean, that would be an unfair burden for people who've been here a lot less time than other people. My other question, more so about the construction project, is why would you start at the end? Like that map that you showed, like you were gonna start at the end of the line where most of the lead lines are, as opposed to the beginning where the actual main is. Because if you start at the end, you're gonna be pushing all the corrosion through the new pipelines, as opposed to starting at the beginning, where you have fresh lines where you're actually moving the bad lines out, pushing the corrosion out.
So the question is, why are we starting on Kensington at the end of the line?
And then over 30 years, those lines are gonna have junk in it, basically, right?
So no, it's not really how it works. That corrosion builds up, and all you get is a little brown particles. Nothing pushes through.
Pretty sure over 30 years, it won't be what you think it will be.
Okay. Well, the reason we're starting with Kensington is because the state has mandated that we replace 5% of our service lines.
Understood.
So the streets that have the highest percentage of service lines, and because we can only do a project every 2 years, that means that and we're not planning on doing a project in 2024, but we still have to make sure we replace enough service lines in year one, that we have enough replaced so far that we're still ahead of where we need to be for the state's replacement schedule.
So you have to hit a number, not necessarily what makes sense.
We are, if we were designing the project based on the water distribution aspect of this, we'd probably approach it differently, yes. But we have to hit a number with the state. And that is basically determining that we have to start with Kensington, Wellesley, and Oakdale. From there, that's when we do the other, system-wide benefit projects, and then we'll look at the other streets we do. Because once you get those three, we need to get out to a lead to make sure that we're ahead of our replacement number with the state. We'll have a little more flexibility down the road to see what makes the most sense for the water distribution system along with those other factors. All right, and so.
Engineer to address that because the issue of distal versus proximal replacement, if we did the proximal as recommended here, would we be possibly causing more undue problems with the infrastructure down the line with more pressure?
Go ahead, Mike. I think you can just hit the button. It should kick over to that one.
Testing, testing. There we go. Could you repeat that?
Well, the issue that came up is where we would start, and it appears to be that the recommendation besides the requirement would be and work our way back to the source of the water coming into the city. And the other option would be if let's start at the beginning, I think that's what you was being said, and work our way out. So the idea of this would be out, would be out of the source of water. The question is like, with human heart diseases, that you start playing around with the source and the source you get some plaque everywhere and block off. If we increase the pressure approximately, are we going to have problems consistently earlier than we want?
No, I wouldn't anticipate any issues. We do have some. I think there were 3 streets that have been replaced in the last 20 years. So you do have a few newer mains within the system on the east side of the city. Mainly on the west side are the older mains. But no, I wouldn't anticipate an issue.
Okay, we're going to start back over here, and we'll come back down the room again.
With regard to the transparency and the messaging, why does this slide that's sitting on that table over there say, can the city fund this project without raising property taxes? The short answer is no. That's false, isn't it?
Where's that at?
Fund this without raising property taxes. The short answer is no. That's
So-
not true.
Let me look at that. That might need to be changed without increasing costs, because the water rates are the other option. You're right.
Right, so, but that's the point that these people are making, that there's a messaging issue going on. From this to the water bill, in which the city said to everyone, hey, if you don't like this water bill, make sure you vote yes on that millage, without telling everyone here, there are other options. And this is a flat misrepresentation to these people.
To be clear, what's the other option if it's not the water rates or the millage?
The flat service fee.
The flat service fee is part of the water rate.
No, but, Jim, this is completely disingenuous. The option that is told to people in the water bill is, this is, your usage is going to determine how much you pay. I'm not advocating for that. Everyone here should pay the same amount. That offers the most certainty we could possibly have. I don't have to wonder for the person who asked, how do I know how this is going to impact me? No, we all pay the same amount. Why was that not the most obvious solution to this? And I understand you can't vote on that, but I'll be talking to the city commission about why this is being brought up right now and jammed down our throat so that you can tell everyone here, well, it's the most reliable thing, it ensures a revenue stream. That's flat out not true.
Okay. Go ahead, Dave.
I think you should come out with a statement saying that Tampa's not right.
I'll fix it.
It's not a fair vote.
Go ahead, Dave.
Some of the comments here seem to be based on the premise that if the millage passed, that we would be paying that millage straight on through, regardless of what happened. If an infrastructure bill came along and we were able to get some money, we'd still be paying that. That's not true, is it? You can adjust how much millage you charge depending on how much you need, not how much was authorized.
You're correct. So any outside money will lower our outlay, and water rates and the infrastructure and the water infrastructure nodes can only be used for water purposes. So outside money that came in. Yeah, correct.
So if we got $2 million from the feds, the millage would be lowered accordingly to that amount of money coming in, because we wouldn't need all the millage.
Right. So the answer to that is we do water quality testing every year. And we are always well under, the question is, do we have to worry about our water safety? Do we have to worry about lead in our water? We do quality testing every year. The results are available on the website, cityofpleasantridge.org/water. Those are published in the state database. The limit is 15 parts per billion for lead that the state sets. That's going down to 12 parts per billion. Our results this past year were 4 parts per billion. So our water quality results are very good. And we have to test only properties that have a lead service line. So we are okay there. If we do exceed that limit for lead in the water, the state says you have to start replacing 7.5% of your service lines every year. So that would accelerate the process that we have to do this project under. So that could be a complication, but so far we've been, knock on wood, very, very good with our water quality testing results.
Jim, is a millage for this or the water rate
right?
Especially with the new meters they were complaining about.
So the question is, are these other communities experiencing these water rate increases? The answer to that is no, they're not, because one, we have 60% lead service lines, and they had 15, 10, 20, somewhere in those. And those other communities have been replacing water mains, and we haven't. And you know, we can talk about why we haven't. Part of that is geology. We are on sand, and our water mains never break. A lot of the other communities around here are on clay, and sand moves. So in the wintertime, when you get freeze-thaw cycles, the sand just moves, and the water main moves with it. A lot of the water breaks you see in other communities happen in the winter when the ground freezes and the clay shears, and then you get a water main break. So.
I was going to say I agree with Charlie that it seems like we're the first out of the chute on this.
We are not.
You know, maybe we just need to have a little bit more information, especially if these other cities aren't moving forward yet.
Well, the other cities, Huntington Woods went ahead and they had, I think, 75 lead service lines to replace in the entire city because they've already done all of their water main replacement. And part of that is because the Huntington Woods water rates and taxes already account for the costs of replacing the water mains, and ours haven't until now. So that's one of the things where, you know, they've priced that in to what they pay already. So, you know, no other city around here is in the situation we're in, unfortunately. We are unique and in a bad way right now for that.
That we should probably get a grant from the government, I would think.
We've applied for everyone that's available and working on some of them.
Should and will are not the same word.
Right. All right, let's see here, and then Nathan, and then we'll come back.
The fund that was set aside for 696, that is a segregated asset fund,
Yes.
and I know we can't use the principal of that fund. Is there no money in interest in that fund? And is there somewhere I, as a citizen, could go to City Hall and look at the numbers in that fund?
The numbers for that are reported in the budget. So if you look at the budget document, I'm sorry, the question is, thank you. The question is the SCAF, the 696 settlement money. Is that something that could be used towards this, or even the interest? And all of that is reported out in the financial statements and in the budget, which is published on the city website. So the fund is 258 and 259 for SCAF. SCAF has $3.2 million of total fund balance. And the interest for SCAF has been used over the years to pay for a portion of the street projects. Lately, it's been used for most of our recreation projects. So the recreation projects that happen in town have been funded by SCAF. We put 2/3 of the SCAF money in a special type of fund that the state allows to be invested like a pension fund. The state rules only allow governments to put excess funds or fund balances in very liquid, very safe vehicles, money markets, cash deposits, things of that nature. Returns very little right now. So when we put that in the Parks and Recreation Fund that can be invested like a pension, that's actually been returning very, very well. And that's what's allowed us to do some of the Parks and Recreation projects. But it can only be used for Parks and Recreation projects. And even then, it's you know, that's returning maybe $150,000 a year, maybe in a good year, because it's invested like a pension fund. We could have bad years. So that is something that exists. It's something that's serving a purpose that's separate than water mains right now, allowing us to invest in and maintain our parks. So those are decisions that, you know, could be made, how we want to prioritize that and use that money. It could be a part of the solution, but it's only a small part of the solution if we choose to tap it. Nathan?
About 3 years ago, consumers came through and surveyed Kensington for gas main replacement. Has there been any discussion with consumers to do this in conjunction at the same time that these water mains and the lines are going to be done, so it's not torn up once, torn up again? They surveyed it. They said they would be through. Obviously, we've been a little challenged the last 20 months.
So yes, the question is, can we piggyback or tie or take advantage of our water main replacement along with consumers' gas line replacement? The short answer is I don't know. Mike, do you think that's feasible?
Yes, we can coordinate with consumers as these projects come about and bring them to their attention. And if their mains need to be replaced, they may do so at the same time if they have the available funding themselves to do it. I have coordinated projects in other communities in a similar manner, so it is possible.
I know a few years ago they were doing Woodward Heights and other streets as well.
Right.
They have an aging infrastructure just like the city does. So if they have the funding available and it's there when we're ready to replace the water mains, they'll work with us.
And to follow up on that, consumers always has to submit their plans to us and get those permitted through us, so we know when they're coming. So yeah, we will do that. Let's continue it on this way. Go ahead.
So you said you're gonna start with Chapter, with Kensington, Wellesley, and you said Oak Ridge, which doesn't exist. You said Oakdale. Oakdale, okay. And are the next streets Sylvan, Maywood, and Fairwood, is it the way it looks here, and do we know, is there a schedule that just hasn't been printed yet?
No, there's no, the question is, we talked about starting with Kensington, Wellesley, and Oakdale being the first three projects we do. But beyond that, no, there isn't. We don't know. That would be where we have to prioritize. It's going to be a long time before we get beyond those three streets. And then the transmission improvements to do the water main along Woodward and the new Indiana water main. So it'll be 7 or 8 years before we move on beyond those. And at that point, we're going to have to prioritize. We got, go ahead, and then we'll come back to you.
So, since it was brought up about the gas mains, and since we're digging up the street, I don't recall what work was done for both storm and sewerage piping in the streets, and I just hate to see that 10 years from now, you come back and say, hey, by the way, we gotta dig up the streets again and fix the water, the storm.
The question was, the question is, we just redid the streets, and we're doing the water mains. We have to dig that up. We're doing the service lines. What about the sewers? The sewers, we have a much better grasp of where we are. We just finished a round of cleaning and televising every sewer in the city. So that's within the last 4 years, we have a visual record of the condition of all of our sewers. We've been doing a lining program where wherever we have any kind of small cracks or defects, we've been lining the sewers. And that really, that renews their lifespan quite a bit. One of the things the City Commission is going to be looking at next week is a project to do some open dig repairs for the sewers based on that cleaning and televising. But again, that's just a few specific locations where we need to repair the sewer so that we can then line it. Because the sewer has, what is it? It's just too much of a defect, Mike, to line?
Yeah, it's either deformed or it might be crushing. Or
Right.
You can't get a liner.
But we're still running a combined system.
We are.
So, don't we think that Lego's gonna come back and say, hey, by the way, guys, you can't run this combined system anymore, you're gonna have to have separate sanitary and storage.
That.
I will fully expect that within the next 7 to 10 years.
We'll see. We don't exist in a vacuum because, everyone would have to separate their systems. We flow into a combined system that flows into a combined system that flows into another city's combined system before it gets to any kind of outlet. So that's a much bigger discussion. Yes, that's possible that somebody could mandate we do that. But yeah. I mean, we could proactively decide that we need to.
Since I'm digging up the street anyway.
Well, we may not be digging up the street. That's the thing with directional drilling. We're going to minimize our street disruption. So there's a lot of, yeah, I don't even want to think about that. We have back here. Yes.
How much funding is available annually for the street replacement project, which was the previous infrastructure bill?
Right. So the infrastructure millage, we did bond for that. We did a small bond to finish those. We're paying that off over, it was a 15-year bond. I think we've got 12 years left. That bond paid for Indiana, Ridge, Bermuda, Norwich, and Hanover. So that work is completed. All the streets have been redone. So right now the infrastructure millage brings in about $320,000 a year. No, it's more than that. Don't quote me on the exact number. I know we have about $120,000 a year left over in that fund after we pay the bonds. And that $120,000 a year we use for just street maintenance projects. So you see that we oftentimes do slab repair or slab replacement to keep our streets in good condition, that's where that money is going.
That's allowed for a capital expenditure?
Pardon?
That's allowed for a capital expenditure?
Street replacement?
Yes.
Repair?
That bond?
Yeah, it's for, the language of the bond allows for maintenance work.
I have a slight concern in that, we pay a very high millage, if you look at everything we pay for, and I think we're currently like at 62 mills,
No, our total millage rate is 46,
46?
Mhm.
Including the schools?
including everything, that's all in.
What is it, city owned?
City only right now, we're at about 21.3. So we pay 21.3 mils to the city, and then the remaining 25 mils, 24 mils is to other taxing jurisdictions.
But either way, adding 3.5, it's still gonna make us look less desirable to home buyers.
We would have a very,
Impact, because either you pay it in the mortgage or your taxes.
our millage rate would still be lower than Ferndale's, and it would be comparable to Huntington Woods. The question is, having a higher millage rate, would it make us look less desirable to potential home buyers?
And it's only till your taxes become a cap. And then
To home buyers.
your SEP is gonna still push your way up.
Right, and again, we've talked about this a lot tonight. If you're a new home buyer and your SEV has popped, if you have one of the more expensive properties in town, we fully acknowledge and understand that the calculus on what the millage means to you is different. Good?
The 60% you're saying, lead lines that need to be replaced, does that include the ones that we don't have accounted for? I think you said there's like 400 or 600 residents that were unaccounted for.
Right, so.
Is there a way that we could look at that, try to bring that cost down?
So, yes, again, the question is the 60% lead service lines, and there are some that are unknown. And is there a way we can look at that to bring the cost down for the project if they're not actually lead? And the answer is yes, but remember that the private service line replacement is only $2,600 a house. It's actually a small portion of the project. So yes, we could reduce costs if there's less lead than we think there is. But when we replace the water main, we have to replace all of the public service lead anyways. One of the issues we're running into with this water meter replacement project we're doing right now is that our 100-year-old infrastructure, a lot of our stop boxes are broken. So we actually can't shut water off to the house because the stop box is broken because it hasn't been replaced. That infrastructure needs to be replaced as well. If you ever had an issue in your house and you needed the water to be shut off, we may not be able to shut the water off to your house.
For clarity, you're saying if we go through the project with replacing the water mains, all services regardless of lead or copper service, all services will be replaced.
Right, yes. Has to be, basically. And then, the other part of it, how we have that unknown bucket that we didn't have records for. Based on the records, we found that 1936 is where all of the service cards and installation cards stopped saying lead. And after 1936, they said copper. So we cross-referenced every property that we didn't have a service card or a record for with the year that it was built. And that's how we made our assumption for what your service line is. So any house that was built before 1936, if we didn't have a record for that house, we assumed lead because it's probably lead. And we're going to find that some of these have been changed. The number is going to probably go down a little bit because some of these have been changed and we don't have records for them. But the private side has probably been changed. The private side most certainly has not. Because no homeowner, in the past it was a homeowner, it's your infrastructure back of the curb. So no homeowner was going to pay the extra $10,000 to replace the public side of the service line. That's, wouldn't be done. Charlie and then Curtis.
What's the lifespan of our current streets, and when are we anticipating that we're going to start over again and start repairing?
So the question is, what's the lifespan of our current streets?
That's where I'm going with it.
Yep, and can we just wait till we redo the streets, right?
Yes.
So the answer to that is that concrete streets will last a very long time if they're kept in good shape. Maplefield is almost 30 years old. Amherst, Cambridge, between Ridge and Woodward, almost 30 years old. And if you look at those streets, there's a lot of life left in those. So I really do think that, Mike, 50 years is a minimum for a street if you do the proactive.
Yeah.
That means all the oldest streets were done 30 years ago. Many streets were done 10, 15. So we could be looking, if we wait to start this project 35 years from now, 20, 30 years.
Is it that dire?
When we open a fire hydrant on one side of the city and people on Elm Park lose all of their water pressure, I think that's a pretty good canary.
Mark, I'll skip the shower.
Yeah.
Jim, question on an ancillary issue, and I don't think it's special pleading, but you talked about lining of sewer lines, which the city owns. For some of us, especially some of us that were at the center of attention during the flat black winds in the last decade or so, we had the sewer lines from the lot lines to the house. We've got issues. They're 100 years old people, and the availability or potential for using sewer lining is very attractive as far as I can tell from what the research I've done. And the question is, if the city has a good contractor that has done that, is that something where there might be some information made available about the process and then maybe even about the contractor, so people might opt in with a known and respected contractor?
So I think if I understand the question, Curtis, you're asking about sewer lining, and we've been doing sewer lining, and would that be an option for a homeowner to line their private sewer lead?
Yeah. Well, no, I know it is. The question is, would a good contractor and costs and marketing and making it available to the city?
No. Residential. So it's a different, the guys who will line your private service lead, that's a 4-inch or maybe a 6-inch pipe versus a 12-inch or 18-inch sewer. It's different contractors who do that work. So the ones we bring in wouldn't even be interested in doing any residential work.
All right. The technology, there's a way to piggyback on what their information with homeowners might like.
Possibly, and a lot of times what you find is a homeowner that needs a private line lined.
Yeah.
Is it the issues with the private line, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Mike, but the mainline sewers are typically in pretty good shape, and we can only line them when they're still in pretty good shape. And a lot of the times a private service line are not really in a level or shape, a good enough shape to be lined. They're too damaged by roots, too deformed. You know, if they disconnect from something, you can't line it. So that's typically what we see with the private lines. I know it can be done, but it has to be done before it gets too bad. And again, yeah, I don't know how to share information about that, but we can think about it. Let's start back over here. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Yeah, when the water line was replaced on Elm Park, it was drilled under the sidewalk rather than the street. And also the material was some sort of a rubberized, wasn't a cast iron line. And is this the intent of the new installations, and is there any life expectancy to that?
Yes. So the answer is yes. We're going to try to get the water mains out from under the street as much as we can. And that'll be a decision that's going to have to be different for every street, because again, the right-of-way widths are different. Some are 50, some are 60, some the boulevards are much wider. So you have different space to work in. You have to look at where all the other utilities are. So there's a lot that goes into that determination where we're going to put those, but that is the intent, to move them out from under the street as much as we can. Most of the water mains are going to be PVC, and that's what's been used for, what, 70 years now, Mike?
70 years.
It doesn't corrode. Nobody uses cast iron anymore because of, obviously, just like no one uses lead. It's old and we don't do that. But PVC's been used for a long time. There's a good track record. It doesn't corrode. So it's a better material. Mike, I don't know. Are there estimates for what the lifespan of a PVC pipe is? Do we even know yet?
No, it hasn't been in the ground long enough to determine, does it surpass 100 years or longer?
Right. But we should expect another 100 years out of a PVC pipe. So that's good. Our kids will thank us, or maybe our grandkids. I don't know.
There's been no water quality issues with PVC over that length of time?
No, not that I'm aware of.
Everybody uses it, and yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
What's the material recommended for the service lines then? Is that also PVC?
So the question is, what's the material recommended for the service lines? And we're going to do copper for all those, right, Mike? Yeah, it's going to be copper service lines. Anyone else?
If we were to mill, would it affect our likelihood of getting things all shored up, you don't look like you need help.
Nobody's going to look at Pleasant Ridge and say you need help, whether we have this millage or not.
Well, what about the water mains though? Because we do have that extra burden.
Every community,
It's not part of the replacing of the service lines,
Right.
but it is quite a large burden for a small community.
the state doesn't provide really funding for water mains. Every community has to do that on their own. So
But
we're,
there's this extra money coming. Didn't Whitmer, I thought she was like, didn't she, the pandemic money now is gonna go to infrastructure, right? The state of Michigan, there's like $302 million.
right, and
20 million was earmarked for Benton Harbor and the rest is out there.
right, and we will continue to apply for all of that money.
And there are grants as well.
I-
Those are all closed.
And we've applied for all of those. And again, we've won none of them.
But you're really not gonna get anything though. Once you shore up your funding, nobody's gonna give you money.
I've never been asked on a state grant or application whether or not we have a dedicated source of funding, because it's assumed that you do. You have water rates. So I don't think so. I don't think that this is going to hurt either way, because our water rates right now are paying for it, or the millage is paying for it. We have a source of revenue to do the project either way.
That's every city.
Exactly. So whether we pass this millage or not,
All would have designated funding on it.
you're right. So this really shouldn't, it's not going to change the calculus.
Desperate if you've got it all shored up. We're never gonna look desperate.
Pleasant Ridge is never going to look desperate.
There's a lot of things left to play out here, and this millage is like hey residents, we're out of options, we made these 18 grants, we displayed those up there, we didn't qualify for COVID money, we didn't qualify for infrastructure money, and it's like, here we are, and, we planned for this over the last 50 years, having a sinking fund, so, tough luck, but I don't think we're there yet, I just don't get that sense. Because you applied for, these are still things that are playing out.
But here's the other thing too, maybe we'll never look desperate, but we look like we need help. Because we're not as prepared as other communities. They've already, like you said, Royal Oak and Oak Park. Oak Park's been replacing, Huntington Woods replaced, they've been replacing, they've already started this process. So maybe, I don't know. There wasn't perfect planning, or maybe because we're smaller, I'm hoping it's because we're smaller and that it just wasn't, something that people thought about. Putting forth the budget.
Alex, and then we'll come back.
As far as the mechanism though, like let's say the feds or the state steps in with funding, you said earlier the millage would be reduced down. What does that look like? And what's the trigger for that?
Well, that's a decision the city commission makes every year at budget time. So the city commission, we have a maximum that we can levy. That's the millage request. The question again was if outside funding, federal or state, comes through, what's the mechanism for adjusting the millage or the rates we charge? And the answer is the city commission makes that decision. The millage rate at 3.5 mils would be the maximum levy, but there's nothing that says you have to levy all of that. You could do 3, you could do 2. So at any time, the city commission can choose to levy less. And if there's outside funding that comes in to supplement to do the project, then the millage rate could be reduced. Water rates could be reduced. There's a lot of levers we could pull. Or we could say, great, instead of doing this over 30 years, let's rip the Band-Aid off now and do it in 25 years. Let's take this extra money and do an extra project this year. All decisions that the city commission would make as they go through and do their budget and project planning every year.
So, to get this straight, so the copper lines, the supply lines, are they flexible lines? Because you said you got a directional bore, or you're directional boring the smaller conduits.
So yes, right now when we've replaced the service lines, the copper line comes in a spool.
Right, and you're talking 10, 12 inch mains, right?
Well, no, the mains would be PVC, and those would be directional drilled and pulled through the ground, and Mike can probably talk about the process for that. That's different than the process used to replace the service lines because it is copper and it is small and it is flexible. But it wouldn't be a total, open cut excavation to put the new water mains in.
Is this money earmarked for this specific project? Like, what if it takes 3 or 4 years before you can get a contractor? Because I heard there's supposed to be a lot of labor shortages.
Yeah.
The demand for this type of work.
So the answer is yes. The millage would be specifically for water infrastructure. It can't be used for anything else. Water rates can only be used for water system projects. So this money can't be moved anywhere else in the city budget, can't be used for anything else, has to be used for water. So if we find, we can't get a contractor to do the project in fiscal year 22, then, maybe we do 2 projects at once. But the projects will get done with this money. And this money will only go towards these projects.
Is there a chance, since there's some interest in the piping materials other than just me, that we could get that posted on the city website, or is the specification available somewhere else?
The question is, could we get the pipe materials posted on, sure, we can do that. I believe it might be, I'll have to look over some of the materials to see if we have that in there, but we can add that.
What does the state have over us if we don't comply?
They can withhold our revenue sharing. They can fine us. So we'll have extra costs above and beyond. So there's a lot of things that they can do to us that are not good.
The meat debt is a fraction of what we're asking just to let service line. We could actually reduce the cost by 75% in our current water bill, that increase is still meat debt.
If we ignore the water main project, yes.
The commission has arbitrarily said, we're going to do this. We're going to jam this in the water bill. We're going to halt this millage pass. It's like, oh, that's a lot of stars to align in a 45-day time span for us all to be digested. So really, the water rate should have gone up just 25%. So you say, okay, we're going to take your lead service lines. Now let's solve it.
And then come back and dig everything up again to do the mains.
Well, that's one because they're boring.
But you have to dig up where every tap, see, here's the thing you have to understand. You might directional dig the main in, but at every place where the service line meets at, you have to dig there. So you're going to be digging, so, if your street has 80 houses on it, we're going to have to dig 80 holes to get down to where that new main is. So there's going to be a lot of potholing. Mike?
That's another point. There's a cost to dig. You have to dig it 3 times. 3 times the cost.
Right, so Mike,
Are you saving anything by?
Well, we're going to dig, next year we're not doing any, right? So we're going to have an off year.
Let's just talk your house.
Sure.
If they have to dig and remove the line, then they have to dig again to replace the main. You don't think that additional cost of having to dig twice?
Oh, it'll certainly be a cost, but we have an off year, setting up the next year.
The cost
So then we figure that out, so we can
so
do the
hold on,
detail patch
hold on.
again,
Charlie,
and the time cost.
hold on. So the cost to replace a public service line is about $10,000. And when we replace a lead service line, it's about $12,000 to $14,000 per service line to replace, because that $10,000 is getting the portion from the sidewalk to the water main. So if we just wait and say we're going to deal with the water mains later, we do have a project for fiscal year 23, Kensington. This year we're doing service lines on those 3 streets. Next year we're doing Kensington. So were we to say, well, we have to replace 40 lead service lines this year. So what we're going to do then is we're going to go out on Kensington, which has 65 lead service lines, and we're going to dig 65 holes in the street, 65 holes on the sidewalk to replace the stop box, to tap into the existing main, and to put the service line into the house. We're going to restore it. We're going to do it with a concrete restoration. We're going to spend that $14,000 per address to do that. And then if we say, okay, well, 20 years from now, we're going to do the water main. Now you're bearing that $400,000 or $500,000 of cost for that street again, because now you have to dig up the stop boxes again to tap the new water main, and you have to dig and install the new water main. So you're saving costs now, but you're not saving costs in the long run with that approach.
Just play out everything that's in play, and then have a plan.
They're not going to do themselves. It has to be done.
Oh, totally understand that.
Putting it off is not going to make it go away.
Okay, so I think, Charlie, you made your point. We're not going to talk about that anymore because you made your point. Does anybody else have anything else? Yes, sir, back here.
Has the city already gone through an RFI or an RFP process?
Well, we'll do that for project by project. For just doing the lead service line replacements we're doing this year, we have a cooperative bid that we did through SACWA. We have a contractor. The SACWA got bids from, I think it was 10 or 15 different contractors. And out of that, D'Angelo Brothers was the contractor that SACWA approved. We are members of SACWA. So we are using D'Angelo to do just the lead service line replacements this year. Each water main project, which includes the lead service line replacements, will be bid out individually. So that will be through the RFQ process.
Okay. I have another question. What about PIP loans and other such loans? Is the city going to offer anything like that?
I'm sorry, what?
PIP, like Michigan's PIP loans?
So the question is the city going to be offering any PIP loans? And no, we don't have the mechanism to do that. We don't have the funding, or those are at a different level. That's federal. So. Was there anything else over here? I think I saw a hand. No? Okay, well.
Are you guys worried at all about litigation? Because I know there's been a lot of talk about that some of this stuff may have to go through the courts because ultimately the water authority is responsible whether it's public or private, the line.
That lawsuit was filed and has already been dismissed in favor of the state. Yep. We were very interested in that because, you know, it was a mandate that the public has to spend public money on private infrastructure, and was dismissed, didn't go anywhere.
But there can still be more private.
I suppose, but yeah, I don't know how much hope I have that they would be successful. And if that happens, then, you know, we'd have to look and see.
Are we the only community in Oakland County that's doing this? Because I haven't found anybody else that has this on the ballot.
Are we the only community in Oakland County that's doing this? The answer is right now, doing a water infrastructure millage, we're the only ones I know of. Berkeley, so we're not the, but Huntington Woods already has a millage, a water millage. So Huntington Woods already has this on their tax rates, as does Birmingham and a number of other communities. So we're the only community doing this right now, but we're not the only community to ever have done this, because, you know, those millage rates you see those other communities pay, they already include water infrastructure millages. Yeah.
If a person wanted to estimate what their own tax increase might be, what to use for a basis? It won't be on your whole tax bill, right?
Correct.
It'll be on the city part.
You're correct. So right now you pay 46.2 mils total. 21 of that, 21.2 is to the city. So both of those, the numerator and the denominator in that, would both go up 3.5. So your city millage rate would go to 23.5. Your total millage rate would go to 49 point something. But of course, you know, the calculus here is that the water rates have already gone up. So really, the question is, what's your change going to be from this year to next year under the water rate scenario versus the millage scenario? Because you could say, oh, my taxes will go up $500, $800, $200, but your water, compared to what you're going to pay for water this year, will go back down. So that's where it gets difficult to say what the, you know, bottom line impact is going to be on everyone under the two scenarios.
Jim, if they wanted to calculate what this was going to cost, they could take, by right, you could take, what's the amount they have to multiply by?
So the question is, if people want to estimate this, the answer to that is email me at citymanager@cityofpleasantridge.org, and I can look up the information and get you a pretty good estimate. Because you have to do that kind of manually for each house.
What your tax rate is, and multiply it by X.
Right. So your total tax bill would go up about 7%. Maybe a little more than 7% under the scenario. I think maybe 7.5%. But what this would do for your water is a very different calculation.
Let's try this again. If they, you're saying total tax rate. If they were to take what their valuation is on their house, their taxable
Right.
value
Right.
They multiply that times what?
You multiply that times 49.2, and then you divide that by 1,000. So, one, everyone has to know what their taxable value is. Two, so really the easiest way, instead of trying to do the math, would be email me at citymanager@cityofpleasantridge.org, and I can put all that together for you. Yes, back here, and then we'll come back over to Alex.
Given there's such a divide between whether it should be water, rate, serve rate, or taxes, what about doing top and bottom?
Right. So the question is, with the sort of the disagreement between whether this is better to do through the ready to serve or the water rates or the millage, why not do half and half? And the answer is, even if the millage passes, it's going to be 75% funded by the millage and still going to be 25% funded by the ready to serve charge, which is the flat rate on your, which is part of your utility bill. So it is a hybrid, even if the millage passes.
Right. What I'm asking is, what about increasing the RDS and decreasing the millage?
You know, that's just a choice. The city commission could do that if they wanted to, even if the millage passes.
Okay.
So, yeah. I think we had Alex, right?
Real quick, if you haven't already said, when will this presentation be posted?
The presentation will be posted tomorrow, and the video will also be available on the city YouTube channel probably immediately.
So since this video will be posted for posterity, I want to ask you a quick question. I don't know if you can answer or not, but I was looking at this tax table, and it's one that says pre-total, which gives our mills at 46.2192, and there's something that says non-pre-total, which is 64.212. Do you know the differences between those?
Yes, so the question is, when you look at the, if you're looking at the Oakland County apportionment of local taxes document, which is where it indicates all of every community's millage rates, and our PRE total is 46.2-ish, and our non-PRE is 64. PRE stands for Principal Residence Exemption. So it's also homestead. So if you're the owner-occupant of your home, you pay the PRE total, the homestead rate. If it's a rental property, if it's a commercial business, you pay the non-PRE rate, which is the higher millage rate. And the difference is that the all of that extra revenue, the extra millages, goes to the schools.
I didn't want to be recording forever, throwing out some bogus numbers.
Understood. So let's clarify that for you. So yeah, you're right. The non-PRE rate is 64, and that's common for most communities because the school tax rate is much higher for non-homestead properties. Good clarification.
What makes that ready to serve? What goes into that?
Ready to serve is infrastructure. So the sewer repairs, the open cut sewers that the city commission is going to be asked to approve the bid for, is funded by Ready to Serve. So Ready to Serve means that we have to have the ability to get water to your house and take it away. And that's not really related to how much water you use. So the usage rate is for the water you use, and then the Ready to Serve it has been.
Everybody the same?
Pardon? Everybody pays the same for Ready to Serve. That is the flat fee that everyone already pays, irrespective of anything else. And again, that's going to be 25% of the funding for this project, even if the millage is levied to its maximum amount. Anybody else? Room's thinned out quite a bit, so I think, oh, yep, Ann?
There was a question that former Commissioner Krzyjak had asked about the trees, because there's a tree fund that's in the budget line.
Right.
In the project.
So the question is, what about the trees? And the preliminary engineer's cost estimates included some lines for tree removal. And the answer is some trees are going to have to be cut down as we do this project because stop boxes, trees have been planted over stop boxes, trees have been planted over service lines. If we're trying to move the water main out from underneath the street, then it's going underneath the trees. And so inevitably, we're not going to be able to avoid cutting some of the trees down. Now, are we going to minimize that to the greatest possible extent? Absolutely. Will we plant a new tree if your tree's cut down? Absolutely. But, trying to keep this out from under the street means that we're going to keep it under some trees and there's going to be some impact there no matter what we do. All right, going once, going twice.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Thanks, everyone. Have a great night.